Hi everyone, it's John Wheatcroft here with another Sunday Q&A. We're up to week number 37, so we've had some great questions once again. I'm going to be looking at using small chords in comping. I'm also going to be looking at some hybrid picking ideas, a couple of cool country licks. I'm also going to be taking a little look at diminished sounds, how we can use diminished sounds in our playing. As always, I'm going to start with a tune. And this is a new piece. This is a solo composition of mine that I'm just about to record. It's called Already in the Past, and it's going to be the last tune on this album that I'm working on. So I've got one solo piece at the start, one solo piece at the end, and then ensemble things in the middle. So this is really new. I only finished writing this week. So I hope you enjoy it. So this is a bit of a preview of hopefully how the album will end, and hope you're staying safe. So on with the music, and then we'll tackle the questions. I had a request from Andy to look into some comping ideas, specifically looking at playing things in a blues or of a dominant seventh type harmony. So I'm going to share with you two comping ideas that come from two Telecaster greats. The first is from the R&B soul legend Cornell Dupree, and Cornell is a master, or was a master, of connecting together small chord shapes, and that's essentially one of the first kind of tips, if that makes sense. Rather than learning big block chords that cover all strings, which are kind of a little bit clumsy in terms of connecting them together. So if I move through various versions of G7, that's good as a building block exercise to have as many of these kind of like fistful type shapes as you can possibly play. But it's nice if you keep the voicings really small, because then they're really movable. So here's something that Cornell might play over, in this case, G7. So everything here is going to be over G7. So what I'm going to do is connect together all these various different voicings for G7. So we start with the first one being 5th fret, 3rd fret, and 4th fret. So that's the 5th, the dominant 7, and the major 3rd of our G7 chord. Okay. Now I could move that to another 3 notes from that chord, in which case that's the 7th, the major 3rd, and the 5th. And you could keep that going. I could move that to the top strings and so on. These kind of ideas. But what's quite nice is if I take any of these small voicings, so maybe this one or this one. So I use those two. So for the purposes of this exercise, I'll just restrict it to these two. Of course, I could take it to anywhere in the chord. And I'm going to move it up or down by 1 scale degree. So if I take this voice in, and I move each of the notes down by 1 degree, I get this. So meaning the D is going to move down to a C. Okay. This is all going to be natural notes G7 coming from the key of C major, so no sharps or flats here. The F is going to go down to an E. That's making sense. Okay, and the B goes down to an A. Okay, now if I move it up, what happens is they all go up 1 scale tone, so the D goes to an E, the F goes to a G, and the B goes to a C. So it's not parallel, it's similar motion. So they're going up different distances. This string goes up a semitone, this string goes up a tone, and so on, and the low string goes up a tone. So now we've got those 3. Okay, we keep going. And again. So now I've got a scale of chords. Making sense? Play melodies. Now, of course, where things start to get interesting is when I cross strings. So this is one voicing that could be moved through the scale. That's the whole scale now. I've done the... And they can all be used for G7. Now let's try it with this voicing. Slightly different configuration of notes. If we wanted the same configuration of notes, we'd have to do this. If I do that, this voicing, now I get an identical chord to what I would get here. But what's nice is this is a different configuration of notes, so now we get a different sound. So in this case, it's the 7th, the major 3rd, and the 5th of the chord. So that becomes same principle. Together. So meaning, let me just run through these shapes one more time a little slower. Okay. So there's our first G7. And this is kind of a suspension. Then we have like a G9. So it might pay, in fact, sorry, forgive me, it would be that, wouldn't it? Although that's cool as well. The same shape, and then we have 2 straight lines. What's quite nice is when if you have parallel shapes like you have here, where you see the same shapes lining up in pairs, we can then use the note in between as a chromatic connection as well, both directions. Thing you could do there as well, kind of more of a country type feel. Okay, so let's now imagine going between different string sets. Of course, we can find these on the top strings as well. You could extend this and continue the pattern. That kind of idea. So that's if I take. So I guess what we could say is if we take this chord, this would be an interesting exercise for you. And take each 3-string group, this 3 strings, these 3 strings, these 3 strings, these 3 strings, and finally these 3. And move each voicing along the scale. You get all these appropriate voicings for G7. It's going to kind of like be G7, G7 sus, G7, depending upon which particular scale tones you choose to highlight. Okay, middle strings, 2 to 4. In fact, let's go back one as well. So you can play it in melody chords almost. And then on the bass strings, I'll leave you to figure out these ones as well, which would be a cool kind of set of chords for you to work out. So you'd have to work, again, figure them out. You could kind of sort of relate them to the harmonized major scale if you wish, by going, okay, that would be G7. The next one we're expecting is going to be like an A minor of some kind. The next one would be like something kind of B half diminished type sound. And then some kind of a C major sound. D minor, E minor, that kind of thing. To a certain extent, when we get to the bass notes of the chord, we have to be a little bit careful that we don't end up sounding like we're playing bass notes rather than upper extensions. So maybe it's more successful in the middle of the guitar. Okay, but we can move throughout the chord now. So I could go from these strings, move, so they're connected. So the strings 3 through 5, then 4 through 2. And maybe I might change to play like a scalar idea. Makes sense? So now I've got this scale idea. Move. Move again. Or maybe there. Yeah, that's going to work, yeah. Okay, so that's our first chord idea coming from the great Cornell Dupree. The second idea comes from another Telecaster master, as the expression goes, the legendary Danny Gatton. And I learnt a lot from Danny Gatton from watching those 2 videos that he brought out for Arlen Roth, who's another guitar player of note, particularly to be applauded for his work in education. Arlen is a legend, and is a wealth of information, so I'd urge you to check out both Arlen and Cornell Dupree and Danny Gatton. In fact, Cornell did a video for Arlen Roth, if I'm not mistaken, a Hot Licks video, which I remember watching, which was really good, as did Danny. So it's those 2 videos that Danny Gatton did, the Telemaster and Strictly Rhythm, are absolutely fantastic. And in one of those, he talks about a way of comping over dominant chords using these 3-note voicings that are rather like what you might play on a pedal steel. So these are based on 6th voicings and on little clusters. But Danny had a really simple way of looking at this. Essentially, what we're doing is a similar thing where we're harmonizing the scale this kind of way. But he's using one of 2 shapes. And it's either a selection of tones, like so, which in this case gives us the root, the 6th, and the 5th, but on 3 separate strings. That kind of sound. And we can use that here. And they're all G versions of G7. They all fit into the G7 family. So there we have this shape. And what he does, he connects it up with this shape. So we've got a consecutive tone idea. It's actually a tone and a minor third, to be strictly accurate. Or it's a series of thirds. Minor third and a major third. So I'm going to run that really slow. So this is our first. These are all G7s. That kind of thing. Okay, so let me run this super slow. So we have the big stretched out one. Then we have the reduced stretch, if you like, on the 9th. So that's off the root. This is off the 9th. Then we have that again off the 3rd. Then we have 2 stretch ones off the 4. and the 5. So just forms of G. So you can hear it against G. Okay, so we've got. And then 2. And then finally. Okay, so to recap, we've got. Those kind of things. Or we've got. Okay, of course, if you're going to play this through a blues, you put this through the 1, the 4, and the 5. So make certain that you can move it through those 3 chords. Preferably trying to find them in the same area would be really good. But you can really use this in a lot of different styles. You could use it for jazz, you could use it in funk, you could use it obviously in blues, definitely in country guitar, and so on. So get stuck into learning these small chord voicings and move them around the guitar as much as you can. I had a request from Jed to look at an introduction to hybrid picking. So I'm going to treat this from a very, very basic level. So this is really simple, suitable for beginners. Not something that's going to be too taxing, I hope, but hopefully something that you can incorporate into your playing. So if it's not something you've done before, this is going to be an introduction to hybrid picking. You don't need any pre-existing knowledge to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at building up the mechanics that allow us to play more than one string at any given time. It makes sense to begin with just one finger, and for many players, that's all they use with hybrid picking. They'll use the pick and one finger. That's all you need for a lot of this stuff. So let's do everything in the key of E. So an E major chord, I'm hoping that's okay for you. Okay, and what we're going to do to begin with is just start with 2 strings at a time. So we do the pick on the low string and the middle finger, and we do them on adjacent strings. So we'll go string 6 and 5 together. Do these together. Then 5 and 4, and you know what's coming next. 4 and 3, 3 and 2, 2 and 1. Little 2-note chords. Something as simple as that. You can while away. Put the TV on, watching a movie, not really watching it, but just allowing yourself to just pick through the notes of basic chords. Okay. Then of course we could stagger those notes and go pick, finger. Whichever way. And that's going to allow you to do like finger picking patterns, within a chord, say. Okay, so that's all just adjacent strings. 6 and 5, 5 and 4, 4 and 3. Okay. Of course, we can put a string skip in there. So the notes are, in this case, all of the odds or evens. So 6 and 4, 5 and 3, 4 and 2, 3 and 1. And something as simple as that. It sounds super cool when you put it into chords. More involved chords, should I say. Again, that can be staggered. So it might be a good idea now to point out that the pick is slightly angled, which is what allows the fingers to come at the strings on an approximate right angle. If the pick is straight, then the fingers are going to glance across the strings on a diagonal, and that's maybe not ideal in terms of tone. And try and bring the volume of the fingers up to the volume of the pick rather than bringing the volume of the pick down to the volume of the fingers. So you want this to be balanced. Of course, you have the option to grow a nail as well, play with nails. I don't choose that for no other reason than my nails aren't very strong. So I found a way to make the calluses softened up a little bit to get more volume. Okay, so once you've done that with our non-adjacent strings, it's then time to bring in an extra finger. So now we're going to use the two middle fingers to give us a 3-note chord. Again, these are all on adjacent strings. There's no reason why they need to be on adjacent strings. They could just as easily be, for example, there I was playing strings 5, 3, and 6, 4, and 2, or 5, 3, and 1. So that's spreading them out. Okay. And then again, we can play that arpeggio, broken. Those kind of ideas. Hellecasters riff, if I remember rightly, uses that rippling 3-note arpeggio and all those banjo figures. They're all based on that 3-note rolling motions. It's keeping it super simple, as I promised today. So let's keep this really basic. So we're not going to play things that are too tricky here. So back to our 3-note arpeggio. Just rippling through the chord. And for the purposes of today, I'm going to keep it to that ascending direction. It seems to work well with the way the hand unfolds. And a huge number of lines are based upon that kind of motion. So if you're interested, we can look at more advanced things. Just drop me a line and we'll look at that in coming weeks. But for today, I'm going to keep things really basic. Okay, so we've got 2 fingers. So thumb and 1 finger, 2 notes. Thumb and 2 fingers, 3 notes. So what's coming next is thumb and all remaining fingers. Give us a 4-note chord. That's really useful for comping if you want to play 3-note voicings. Those kind of ideas. So then I'm forced, by definition, that if I want those voicings, which I've got 4 notes in them, that I have to use all fingers. Either that or I need to get rid of the pick somehow. Okay, so back to our open E chords, keep things simple, remember? 4 notes, 4 notes, 4 notes, 4 notes, 4 notes. And it might take a little bit of time to build up the callus on your little finger so that you can get a good sound. And I use it far less than the others, but I do use it nonetheless. And then we've got our 4-note arpeggio now. Let that ripple out. So just to recap, 2 notes, 3 notes, 4 notes. So at this point, it's good to just draw your attention to the time it might take to build up the calluses if you're not using nails. And if you are using nails, then you need to really look after them because steel strings and nails don't really mix, to be fair. So I would suggest not going crazy with this. If you are new to this technique, then little and often until you begin to build up some calluses. I find, for example, the first finger on guitar doesn't really, for me, get used that much because it's usually holding the pick. But then when I play bass, the first finger is being used all the time. So if I have a period where I'm not playing that instrument, it really lets me know pretty quickly when I come back to it that I haven't been playing, because even at this stage of the game, after playing all the years I've been playing, I can still build up calluses. Likewise, I had a period the start of the summer where I was playing mainly gypsy jazz style, And I didn't play electric guitar for a while, other than working scenarios, gigs and stuff like that. I wasn't really practicing. And I did a real heavy session of hybrid picking, and I really felt it, because these fingers don't really get used so much in the Django style. Not for any other reason than you need to project, to make the notes project. Generally speaking, it's more of a pick-based style, rather like bluegrass, rather than, say, electric country styles, which are going to use a lot of picking fingers. So it takes time to build up those calluses. So I'd say go easy. As well as this is a physical technique, there's absolutely no problem with sticking, watch a Sopranos box set or whatever, and I can quite happily, be plowing through daytime TV with the sound turned down low, and just sort of mindlessly letting my fingers just fall on these strings, so that it begins to feel less alien. It begins to feel more kind of a natural thing. If it's not something you've done, it will take a little bit of time, so be patient. As I've got a Telecaster in my hands, let's wrap some of these hybrid picking ideas up into a snappy country lick. So this is based around a great message I got from Tony, asking to look into some country stuff. So this is just a really brief introduction into country via one riff. So what we're going to do here, we're going to use the pick on the A string or the E string, depending upon what key we're playing the riff in. And then we're going to use the middle two fingers to snap two string chords, which you don't get the same effect if you use the pick to play both of those things. So maybe that might be the first exercise. Just do this. Or, okay. Now I'm going to play a bass line. Or typical rock and roll kind of boogie woogie piano, left-hand piano bass line. But the trick is to intersperse the bass line with the pick with the double stop chords with the fingers. So really slow, I'm going to play this. So I'm going. In fact, what's actually happening is the pick's going. And the fingers are doing the. So it's pick, fingers, bass, fingers, pick, fingers. So that last one's an up stroke. It's all downs, up. It's actually one of those things that's easier to play fast, actually, to not think about. But I'm going to play it slow. So it's pick, fingers, pick, alternate, fingers. As in one note each time. And then finally upstroke with the pick. We can do this in B as well. Now, did you notice there was a little dummy stroke with no bass notes? So a dummy stroke, a ghost note. Those kind of things. So we can add the 3 and 7. So that's the, in this case, well, the 7 or the 3 from low to high. We can slide into that, or we can use open strings. Open. So this idea of the pick against two fingers, it's is in a lot of these kind of licks where we're going between those two ideas. You know, this idea where you might play the pick against a pair of notes to create a double stop idea. So that's a Scotty Anderson lick where he slides in, sliding into, there you go. Super cool. So we can look at more of these ideas in the future, but just as a way of getting us to kind of put the double stop hybrid picking technique into a musical context, here's our phrase. And the trick is to be quite snappy, so play quite hard here. Particularly if, like me, you've not got nails, we have to allow the calluses to build up over time so that we can get a snappy and bright tone. I had a great request from my mate Mickey to take a look at some diminished ideas. So this is something we're going to do over a couple of weeks, so I'm just going to give you a bit of an introduction into the true diminished sound, as opposed to when diminished chords are being used as a substitute for dominant sevenths. So I guess the first thing to do is to establish when is a diminished chord actually being used as a diminished chord. And that's not really, might sound like a trick question, but it's not always that obvious actually. So for example, if I were playing a progression like this in the key of C, and I were to play C major, to C sharp diminished, to D minor, to maybe D sharp diminished, to E minor, to the same D sharp diminished, to D minor, to G7. What's actually happening there is the diminished chord, specifically this one, is functioning in two different ways, depending upon whether it's ascending or descending. So when these chords resolve like so, like usually by a semitone below or from a tone above, or any kind of multiple of minor thirds, it's actually functioning as a dominant. So really what's happening here, that's going C, and we thought that was C sharp diminished, but in actual fact it's an A7 with a flat 9, like so. And then we had the D minor, and then we thought that was a D sharp diminished. It's actually a B7 flat 9 going to E minor. So really it's going C, A7, D minor, B7, E minor. And a lot of the time when you're using diminished chords, that's what's happening. So like when Wes Montgomery goes A minor, say, and does something like that kind of idea. We go diminished, minor, diminished minor, diminished minor. In actual fact, that's E7 going to A minor, and that's E7 going to A minor, and this is E7 going to A minor, and this is E7, and that's an A minor. So in Django, those kind of licks. What's actually happening there, you think it's a diminished, but it's really actually a dominant 7 in disguise. And that alters the scale choice. So for example, if I'm going C sharp to C sharp diminished, and I try and play C sharp diminished scale against that, going to D minor, that's going to sound really funny. I hope you agree that sound doesn't really work. So it might be a bit confusing then if you think, well, if I don't use diminished scales against diminished chords, where do I use them? Where would you actually use the diminished scale? And I'm going to stay kind of a bit away from the idea of half-whole scale just for the moment, just so that we're clear and we're actually talking about diminished, not about the dominant 7th, cousin of diminished, the second mode, as it were. So the reason why diminished scale doesn't work against those chords is they're not really diminished chords. If I play C to what I think is C sharp diminished, it's really A7 flat 9. So I have to consider what might I play against A7 flat 9. say a choice like the Phrygian dominant might work. That sound. Or just the 7/9 arpeggio. Those kind of lines that you hear in jazz, you know, quite a lot. Okay, so you might be thinking, okay, well, if that's not a diminished, when is it a diminished? When actually is it a diminished? And one of the instances, the predominant instance where it is functioning as diminished, and you would use the diminished scale, is when the chord can be traced back and can be found to be a substitute of the one chord, and when it's not resolving like a dominant. So for example, when I went before C to C sharp diminished, that is resolving like A7, going to D minor, and this is like B7, going to E minor. Although when I go down to D minor, in that direction, this chord now, where previously it was a substitute for B7, it's no longer functioning as a dominant, because that's not the dominant of D minor. I get a tune like All the Things You Are, last bars, no, it's not in this key. That kind of thing, or like in No More Blues or Duke and Dukey, all of those type of tunes. Donna Lee's got one as well, where the part of Donna Lee goes. That kind of thing. Where's that diminished coming from? Well, if we're seeing it as if it's in A flat, it's going to A flat diminished. So the actual diminished scale can be used when the diminished is functioning as a one chord, right? But it's often disguised. We'll often do this little slick disguising trick, because remember that the one, let's go back to C major for a moment. The one, if I say to C diminished, that kind of move, C diminished is E flat diminished, and E flat diminished is G flat diminished, and G flat diminished is B double flat. Let's call it A, just for just thinking clarity. We'll call that A. Right. So what can happen is any one of those four possibilities can be used in progressions to disguise the fact that it is actually a one chord. So when you hear things like Red House, you know, if I play Red House and so I go that there, that thing, that. So my analogy for diminished chords, it's rather like a kind of a bouncy castle or something. You push it down, and you know as soon as you kind of let go, it's going to bounce back up again. So something that you depress bounces back up again. So this is what's happening with that diminished sound. So maybe we go to A. The diminished sound is this. So we basically go. And we can even include that major 7. That's what it's allowing us to do. It's allowing us to go down and then rise back up again. That's what's happening. That's the kind of the active part of this diminished sound. So what we need to be able to do, and where you might not spot it, is when it's used like in a kind of an inversion like this. But I'm sure you've played things that go. Three, or first inversion 1, diminished. So that's 1 diminished. That's a 1 diminished. 2, 5. So in our progression we started with, this diminished chord has got two different functions. C, A7, D minor, B7. Okay, now we might think that's E minor, but we know E minor is C major. Yeah? It's the same thing. And then we go. So that's C major to C diminished, D minor, G7, and out again. Okay, so here's the thing that I want you to practice. This is what you need to practice to be able to make this work. And we'll look at some specific lines once we get moving, but I want you to practice this to make this work, right? I want you to go, we'll pick a key, like let's go B flat, because there's a really famous song that goes. does that in the melody. I'm sure you know which one that is. And that's what that's doing. Diminished. As my mate Andy McKenzie says, Jamie Abersol invented this, I think, in that song, you know. The actual movie that it's from, that's the chord. There's a great Peter Bernstein video where he tears that piece to pieces, and he explains why that works, that diminished to the one move. But anyway, let's imagine B flat. So what you've got to practice is going diminished scale, major, so going from major, so as if we're going that kind of sound. So you could take it from each string. You can do this to minor as well. Interestingly, it's the same diminished scale. Of course it is, because if you think about diminished moves in minor thirds, B flat diminished is G diminished, and that would be the relative minor. So if we let's do it in G minor now. You would go G minor to G diminished, back to G minor to G diminished to G minor. In practice going between those two. And that's what you would use, say it was like an All the Things You Are type progression. 4 minor, 1 diminished. That's what that is. 1. It might look like the 3 chords, but remember the 1 and the 3 are the same thing. And that's the scale that you'd use. So you're gonna those kind of ideas. So that's the kind of thing that you should practice in preparation for the ideas that we're going to look at in the next week or so. So 1 diminished, 1 diminished. And practice going between those two things. Now whilst we're at it, once you've got your diminished scale, make sure you've done all these thirds, fourths, fifths, and so on, and you've done the triadic things. So instead of it just being, you've worked on all those kind of ideas. Then you've got the kind of various chordal type things that you can do with diminished. So what we'll do to finish today, I'm going to show you a very simple pair of chordal licks that you can use within the diminished scale. Both of these licks spell out B flat diminished going to B flat major 7. Here's the first one. It's a triadic idea: G flat, E flat, A, G flat, C, A, C, A, B flat major 7. The next one is 7 raised 9 to 13 flat 9 voicings. So that can be moved. Like the first one can be, you can continue to move it along the length of the guitar neck in minor thirds. So one more time. Okay, so we got that kind of idea as a pair. So I hope you enjoyed this week's session. Hope you got something from it. Once again, thanks so much for getting this far. The comments, likes and shares are greatly appreciated. It goes a long way, so thank you for that. If you've got any topics that you want me to look at in forthcoming weeks, just send me a message. Either contact me below on Facebook, or you can email me, john@johnwheatcroftguitar.com. It's a good way of getting in touch. Also, if you want a copy of my first CD, then you can email me there, or message me on Facebook or what have you. Yeah, that'd be really great. The second one is in the works, so I'm nearly there, keeping up with my track a month. So wish me luck, and hopefully within the next few months that will be completed. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying inspired. You're continuing to practice and make music a big part of your life. Take care of yourself, and I shall see you next week.